I was Brooks Thompson, a 35-year-old architect from Boston, with what I thought was a loving marriage of 6 years to Jake. My mother and I shared a special bond throughout my life, and even more so after my father passed when I was in college. When she died last month, leaving me her fortune, Jake suddenly changed. Within days, divorce papers appeared. What Jake never expected was that my mother, with her quiet wisdom, had already predicted this betrayal. Let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you want more stories about justice served cold. I built my architecture career from the ground up after graduating from Cornell. Long hours at the firm paid off as I worked my way to becoming a senior designer at one of Boston's premier architecture studios. I specialized in sustainable urban housing, finding fulfillment in creating spaces that helped communities thrive while being environmentally conscious. My colleagues respected me for my work ethic and creative vision, and I took pride in earning everything through my own merit. I met Jake Hudson at a charity gala supporting urban renewal projects in underprivileged neighborhoods. He approached me after my presentation about affordable housing designs, eyes bright, with what I mistook as passion for community development. With his confident smile and seemingly genuine interest in my work, I was quickly drawn in. Jake worked as a financial advisor at what he described as a prestigious investment firm, always dressed impeccably in tailored suits that he said were essential for impressing clients. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romantic dinners, weekend getaways to coastal towns, and long conversations about our dreams. Jake talked about building a life together where we could both pursue our passions while supporting each other. Within 6 months, he proposed during a sunset boat ride along the Charles River. I said yes without hesitation, believing I had found someone who truly valued me for who I was rather than what I had. Our wedding was an elegant affair at a historic Boston hotel. My mother Eleanor spared no expense, though I had initially argued for something more modest. Jake charmed everyone, including my mother, with thoughtful toasts and attentive gestures throughout the celebration. The first 2 years of marriage felt like a dream, as we settled into a comfortable brownstone in Back Bay that we could barely afford on our combined salaries. Looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning, waving wildly while I was blinded by love. Jake would casually inquire about my family's wealth, asking questions about my mother's real estate holdings or investment portfolios under the guise of professional curiosity. He suggested numerous times that I ask my mother for financial help to upgrade our home or take luxury vacations proposals. I always declined. Jake maintained an image of success, but his spending habits contradicted his supposed financial expertise. He insisted on dining at the finest restaurants, bought designer clothes with alarming frequency, and leased a German sports car that strained our budget. Meanwhile, I maintained the practical spending habits my mother had instilled in me, saving diligently and investing in our future. My mother Eleanor had built her fortune from nothing. After immigrating to America as a young woman, she worked multiple jobs to put herself through college, eventually starting a small property management company that grew into a real estate empire spanning 3 states. She never flaunted her wealth, choosing instead to live comfortably but modestly in the same Cambridge home where I grew up. Our Sunday dinners were sacred, a tradition we maintained even after my marriage. Jake would occasionally join us, but more often found excuses to be elsewhere. During these weekly gatherings, my mother and I would discuss everything from business to philosophy to family history. She was my mentor, my confidant, and my biggest supporter. I now realize she had concerns about Jake from early on. She would ask subtle questions about our relationship, studying my responses carefully. Once, after Jake had canceled on dinner last minute, she said something I should have paid more attention to. "Brooks, remember that the person who stands beside you during difficult times is showing you their true character." As her health began to decline 3 years into my marriage, she became more direct in her life lessons. She talked extensively about financial independence and the importance of protecting assets. Money makes people act strangely sometimes, even the ones you believe you know best. She told me during one of our final private conversations. I nodded politely, never imagining she was preparing me for what was to come. When her cancer diagnosis came, it was aggressive and advanced. I took a leave of absence from my firm to care for her during her final months, moving temporarily into her home to manage her medications, appointments, and comfort. Jake visited rarely, claiming work pressure prevented him from being more present. When he did come, he seemed distracted and uncomfortable in the sick room, often finding reasons to step out for calls that he insisted were urgent client matters. What I did not know then was that my mother noticed everything from her bed. Between treatments, she held private meetings with her attorneys. I assumed they were routine estate planning sessions and respected her privacy. During one particularly difficult evening after a round of chemotherapy, she gripped my hand with surprising strength and said, "True colors show when money flows, my son. Remember that." I thought it was just the medication talking. The funeral was held on a rainy October day. Hundreds of people whose lives my mother had touched came to pay their respects. Jake stood beside me, arm around my shoulder, the perfect image of a supportive husband. He shook hands with business associates and old family friends, expressing profound sadness over the loss of his beloved mother-in-law. As soon as we returned home, before I could even remove my tie, Jake asked about the will. "When do you think they will read it? Did she ever mention specifics to you?" His questions felt inappropriate given that we had just buried my mother, but I attributed his insensitivity to different ways of processing grief. I told him we would meet with the attorney in a month, as was stipulated in her final arrangements. That month was one of the darkest periods of my life. I struggled to process my grief while handling my mother's extensive business affairs and contemplating my return to work. Jake became uncharacteristically attentive, bringing me breakfast in bed, suggesting grief counseling, and talking about taking an extended vacation once everything was settled. His sudden change in behavior should have alerted me, but in my emotional state, I merely felt grateful for the support I had missed during my mother's illness. The reading of the will took place in the wood-paneled conference room of my mother's longtime law firm. Jake insisted on accompanying me dressed formally, as if attending a business meeting rather than a family matter. The attorney, Martha Goldstein, had worked with my mother for over 20 years and knew our family dynamics intimately. When Martha announced that I had inherited the entirety of my mother's estate, valued at approximately $12 million, including real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and her company's shares, Jake squeezed my hand so hard it nearly cut off circulation. Martha continued, explaining that the inheritance came with specific conditions that would be detailed in private with me, which caused Jake to shift uncomfortably in his seat. On the drive home, Jake was practically vibrating with excitement. "Can you believe it, babe? 12 million? This changes everything for us." His focus on the money rather than the loss it represented was jarring. He immediately began listing all the things we could do with the inheritance: buying a vacation home in the Hamptons, upgrading to a penthouse downtown, investing in startups he had been researching. Over the next week, Jake transformed into someone I barely recognized. He became excessively affectionate, bringing home expensive gifts and planning elaborate date nights. He suggested I quit my job at the architecture firm, saying I no longer needed to work and could pursue my passions without financial constraints. When I explained that my career was already my passion, he seemed genuinely confused. The pressure to upgrade our lifestyle was constant. Jake brought home real estate listings for multi-million-dollar properties and brochures for luxury cars. He talked about hosting lavish parties and taking first-class trips around the world. When I expressed reluctance to make major changes while still grieving, he became impatient, suggesting that my mother would want us to enjoy life to the fullest with her gift. I might have continued attributing his behavior to excitement had I not discovered the hidden credit card statements. While searching for a document in our home office, I found statements for accounts I never knew existed, showing outstanding debt exceeding $200,000. The charges were primarily from casinos, luxury retailers, and expensive restaurants I had never visited. When confronted, Jake initially denied everything, then claimed the accounts were for business development. After several hours of heated discussion, he finally admitted to having a gambling problem that had spiraled out of control over the past few years. He broke down crying, promising to seek help and swearing he had planned to tell me once he got things under control. He suggested we use a small portion of the inheritance to clear the debt so we could start fresh, framing it as a one-time solution to put his mistakes behind us. I agreed to consider helping with the debt if he sought professional help, but something felt off about his confession. It seemed too calculated, too conveniently timed. That night, unable to sleep, I began looking deeper into our financial situation and Jake's behavior. What I discovered next sent chills down my spine. Jake's browser history revealed searches about inheritance laws in our state dating back to before my mother's death. He had researched topics like spouse rights to inheritance and contesting a will in Massachusetts. Most disturbing was a draft email to a divorce attorney discussing potential upcoming inheritance and inquiring about how to maximize entitlement in a settlement. Still reeling from this discovery, I reached out to a mutual friend who had grown distant since our wedding. After some hesitation, she revealed that Jake had a pattern of targeting financially prosperous partners. His previous relationship had ended when the family became suspicious of his intentions. She apologized for not warning me sooner, explaining that Jake had threatened to spread damaging rumors about her if she interfered. Armed with this knowledge, I became more resistant to Jake's financial demands. When he insisted on being added to the accounts where the inheritance would be deposited, I refused, suggesting we seek financial counseling first to create a proper management plan. This triggered the first real argument we had had since my mother's death. "You don't trust me. After all we've been through together," he shouted, his charming facade crumbling. "That money belongs to both of us. We are married. What is yours is mine." The week that followed was unbearably tense. Jake alternated between cold silence and aggressive persuasion. He left brochures for couples financial counseling, where the advisor was actually a friend of his from college. He sent texts throughout my workday about properties he wanted to view. At night, he would either sleep on the couch or make exaggerated romantic gestures with no middle ground. Then came our 6th wedding anniversary. I had spent the day at work expecting at minimum a nice dinner out, as Jake had hinted at special plans. When I arrived home, instead of a romantic setup, I found Jake sitting at our dining table with a folder in front of him. "I filed for divorce this morning," he announced without preamble. "My lawyer thinks we should be able to settle quickly if you agree to an equal division of all assets, including your recent inheritance." The shock rendered me speechless. Jake continued in a businesslike tone, explaining that he felt unappreciated and sidelined in our relationship, particularly regarding financial decisions. He claimed that my refusal to share the inheritance was the final proof that I didn't truly love or trust him. His lawyer, he informed me, was prepared to argue that since we had been married during the period when the inheritance value had appreciated, and since Jake had provided emotional support during my mother's illness, he was entitled to half of everything. He slid a document across the table outlining a settlement proposal that would give him $6 million plus our home. I sat frozen, watching 6 years of what I thought was love disintegrate into a naked cash grab. The man across from me was a stranger, wearing my husband's face, calculating and cold, as he attempted to claim my mother's legacy. That night I checked into a hotel, my mind racing between panic, heartbreak, and a growing sense that I had been played from the very beginning. The next morning I called Martha Goldstein in a state of distress. "Jake filed for divorce and is demanding half of the inheritance," I blurted as soon as she answered. "Can he actually get it? Please tell me he can't take what my mother worked her entire life to build." Martha's response surprised me. Instead of concern, she sounded almost pleased. "Brooks, I think it's time for our private meeting about those conditions in the will. Can you come to the office this afternoon? And please do not discuss anything further with Jake until we've spoken." 3 hours later, I sat in the same conference room, where the will had been read, clutching a cup of tea that I was too anxious to drink. Martha entered with a thick folder and a surprisingly serene expression. "Your mother was an exceptional woman, Brooks. Smart, perceptive, and always 10 steps ahead." She placed the folder on the table between us. "She came to me approximately 2 years ago with concerns about Jake. She didn't share these with you because she didn't want to risk damaging your relationship if she was wrong." Martha explained that my mother had hired a private investigator after noticing concerning patterns in Jake's behavior. The investigator uncovered Jake's history of dating wealthy individuals, his gambling debts, and previous attempts to access family money through romantic relationships. Eleanor knew confronting you directly might backfire. You were in love, and people in love often can't see clearly, so she created a safety net instead. Martha opened the folder to reveal complex legal documents. The $12 million you've inherited isn't directly accessible to you right now. My heart sank momentarily before Martha continued with a slight smile. Your mother placed everything in an irrevocable trust with very specific conditions. The trust is designed to activate and transfer full control to you only after you have been divorced for 1 full year or after 5 years of marriage from the date of her death if you remain married. The brilliance of the arrangement slowly dawned on me. So Jake can't touch it through the divorce. Exactly. The inheritance is legally classified as separate property, under the terms of the trust completely untouchable in divorce proceedings, regardless of the arguments his lawyer might make about marriage duration or emotional support. But the protections went even further. Martha explained that my mother had included a special clause, stipulating that if any spouse attempted to claim a portion of the inheritance through legal action, their potential share would automatically be donated to a charitable foundation supporting victims of financial exploitation. Your mother wanted to ensure that anyone attempting to access her fortune for the wrong reasons would ultimately end up helping those who had suffered from similar exploitation, Martha explained with unmistakable satisfaction. After leaving Martha's office, I went directly to my mother's house, which was now legally mine. Among her personal effects was a leather-bound journal I had never seen before. Inside, in my mother's elegant handwriting, were detailed observations about Jake dating back to our engagement party. She had noted his excessive questions about family wealth, his disappearances whenever business was discussed, and his lack of interest in my career achievements, compared to his intense interest in her business holdings. Most revealing was an entry from just 3 months before her diagnosis, overheard Jay on phone and garden discussing long-term investment and patience paying off soon, not discussing stocks. My intuition says he's referring to Brooks and potential inheritance. The journal documented her decision to protect me. Cannot tell Brooks my suspicions. He loves Jay and would defend him. Must protect my son financially while allowing him to discover the truth in his own time. Will speak with Martha about trust structures tomorrow. Armed with this knowledge and Martha's legal confirmation, I felt a strange combination of heartbreak and vindication. The man I had loved for 6 years had likely targeted me from the beginning as a path to wealth. Yet my mother, even in death, had found a way to protect me. Jake's reaction to the trust revelation was nothing short of spectacular. His lawyer contacted Martha to verify the trust's terms, clearly expecting to find a loophole. When none was found, Jake appeared at my hotel room, alternating between rage and desperate backpedaling. You knew about this the whole time, he accused, face flushed. You and your mother plotted against me. When I calmly explained that I had only learned about the trust arrangement after he filed for divorce, his strategy shifted instantly. His anger dissolved into contrition as he claimed the divorce filing was a mistake made in the heat of the moment and that his lawyer had misunderstood his intentions. We can work this out, Brooks, he pleaded, attempting to take my hands. I filed because I felt you pulling away. It was a cry for attention, not because I actually want to leave you. I love you, not your money. His performance was almost convincing, but the journal entries, the browser history, and the draft emails had permanently removed my rose-colored glasses. When I declined his offer of reconciliation, his facade cracked again. You will regret this, he hissed. 1 year is nothing. I can wait to get what's mine. It was never yours to begin with, I replied, closing the door on what I now recognized as 6 years of elaborate deception. The weeks that followed were emotionally turbulent. I started therapy to process both my grief over losing my mother and the end of my marriage. The therapist helped me identify manipulative patterns in Jake's behavior that I had normalized over the years, his subtle undermining of my confidence, isolation from friends who might have warned me, and his skillful way of making his expensive tastes seem like investments in our future. Each session brought painful realizations about the relationship I had believed was loving and genuine. I questioned every anniversary gift, every seemingly spontaneous romantic gesture, wondering if they had all been calculated moves in Jake's long game. The truth was devastating, but also freeing. For the first time I could see the full picture of the man I had married. Jake made several more attempts to reconcile, each more desperate than the last. When charm and apologies failed, he resorted to threats and emotional manipulation, claiming he would reveal embarrassing personal details to my colleagues, or contest the will on grounds that my mother had been mentally incompetent when she would just created the trust. Our final confrontation came when he showed up at my office unannounced. As my colleagues watched uncomfortably, he made a scene about being unfairly cut out of our future. When security prepared to escort him out, he blurted out what I had long suspected but never confirmed. "I researched your family before I ever approached you at that charity event," he shouted, as he was led away. "I knew exactly who your mother was and what she was worth. You were supposed to be my ticket." His admission, witnessed by my entire department, was the final confirmation of what my mother had protected me from. That night I sent Martha a text. Mom was right about everything. Proceeding with the divorce as quickly as possible. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward, once Jake realized the trust was impenetrable. His lawyer made several attempts to challenge the arrangement, arguing that the trust was created with the specific intent to defraud Jake of his marital rights. The judge, an older woman, with little patience for such tactics, dismissed these claims outright. "The court finds that Mrs. Eleanor Thompson had every right to structure her estate as she saw fit," she stated firmly. "The timing and conditions of the trust do not constitute fraud, but rather prudent estate planning. Mr. Hudson's claim to these assets is denied in full." Jake left the courthouse with nothing but his own considerable debt and the knowledge that his scheme had failed completely. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that this chapter of my life was closing and gratitude for my mother's foresight. The year that followed the divorce was a period of profound healing and rediscovery. I sold our brownstone, unable to continue living in a space filled with false memories, and purchased a light-filled loft in a different neighborhood. The change of scenery helped me create psychological distance from my past life with Jake. I recommitted to my architecture career with renewed passion, taking on challenging projects focused on community development. Working helped distract me from dwelling on the betrayal and connected me with colleagues who became a genuine support system. Unlike Jake, these friends stood by me without ulterior motives, offering both professional collaboration and personal companionship during my recovery. To honor my mother's legacy, I established a foundation dedicated to providing resources and legal assistance to victims of financial abuse, particularly those targeted through romantic relationships. The foundation partnered with local law schools to offer pro bono representation and financial literacy workshops. Each time we helped someone escape an exploitative situation, I felt my mother's wisdom living on. Exactly 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I received notification that the trust conditions had been met and the inheritance would now transfer fully to my control. Martha invited me to her office for the official signing, a moment that felt like the true end of the ordeal Jake had put me through. After completing the paperwork, Martha handed me a sealed envelope. "Your mother left this for you with instructions to give it to you only when the trust activated." Inside was a USB drive containing a video message recorded during her final months. That evening, alone in my new home, I watched my mother's final message with tears streaming down my face. She looked frail from her illness, but spoke with the same strength and clarity that had guided me throughout my life. "My darling Brooks, if you are watching this, then my suspicions about Jake were unfortunately correct. I am so sorry for the pain you must be feeling right now. Please know that protecting you from those who would take advantage of your generous heart has been my lifelong mission." She explained that she had recognized in Jake the same calculating nature she had encountered in business rivals throughout her career. The signs were subtle but unmistakable to someone who has seen that kind of disguised greed before. I chose not to share my concerns directly because I knew you needed to come to your own conclusions. Love cannot be argued away with logic or evidence. Her final words brought both comfort and a renewed sense of purpose. The money is now truly yours to use as you see fit. But remember that true wealth lies in authentic connections with people who value you for yourself, not what you can provide them. I built my fortune through hard work and integrity, and I know you will honor that legacy by living with the same principles. I love you immensely, and am proud of the man you have become, regardless of the path that led you here. 6 months after gaining control of the inheritance, I received an unexpected email from a woman named Sarah. She had met Jake at a fundraiser for a children's hospital, where she served on the board of directors. Their whirlwind romance had progressed rapidly, until she mentioned her family's philanthropic foundation to a friend who recognized Jake's name from the gossip that had circulated in our social circles. "I want to thank you for not staying silent," she wrote. "The friend who warned me had heard about your experience from a mutual acquaintance. You saved me from making a terrible mistake." Learning that Jake had already attempted to implement the same scheme with another wealthy target might have once reopened my wounds. Instead, it brought a sense of closure. His pattern had been exposed, and his reputation now preceded him in the circles where he once operated so smoothly. The experience transformed my approach to relationships of all kinds. I developed clearer boundaries and became a better judge of character, recognizing the difference between genuine connection and calculated interest. I no longer viewed skepticism as cynicism, but as a necessary component of wisdom in both personal and professional interactions. Most importantly, I found a freedom and emotional independence that I had never known while with Jake. Building a life that was authentically my own, without the subtle manipulations I had grown accustomed to, was both challenging and deeply rewarding. I dated occasionally, but without the rush to commit that had characterized my relationship with Jake. When I did eventually meet someone special, our foundation was built on mutual respect and shared values, rather than superficial charm or financial considerations. My mother's posthumous influence on my life extended far beyond the financial protection she had arranged. Her journal became a source of wisdom I returned to, regularly finding new insights in her observations about business relationships and personal integrity. The woman who had built an empire from nothing continued to guide me toward building a meaningful life based on genuine connections and purposeful work. Looking back now, I can see that what Jake thought was his misfortune was actually his most revealing moment of truth. The man who believed he had found a shortcut to wealth through marriage discovered instead that authentic character always reveals itself eventually. My mother's careful planning didn't just protect her financial legacy, it created the circumstances that revealed the truth I needed to see. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, you know the journey isn't easy, but can lead to unexpected strength. Have you experienced someone showing their true colors when money was involved? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of justice and healing resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video so others can find it too. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most painful lessons lead to the most profound growth. I wish you relationships built on genuine love and respect, not hidden agendas.